Da, 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 da. Hello, everybody. I guess right now everybody is Dolores. Hi, Dolores. And hi, Kay. Please do share. I greatly appreciate it because I didn't have much time for it tonight. Glad to see you here. I don't know where Evelina is. But maybe the topic isn't of interest to as many people as usual. In spite of that, I think it's very important because it's important that Trump gets held accountable. Enormously important. Specifically, it's also very important that he not be able to hold office again. I don't know if trying to stop him with illegal means will actually stop him, but it may. It may stop the Republican Party from nominating him. Of course, I can foresee a scenario where that doesn't work, and maybe we'll talk about that as things go on. But right now, I'm going to start by sharing a piece from Truth Out. By William Rivers Pitt, who says Democrats threw away the chance to call witnesses. I'm still not over it. And William Rivers Pitt wrote this on February 16th, just yesterday. He says 55 votes to hear witnesses, quote unquote. I giddily announced on Facebook at precisely 10:30 a.m. on Saturday, February 13th. Collins, Ben Sass, Lisa Murkowski, Lindsey Graham, and Mitt Romney included. I could scarcely believe it. All throughout the abbreviated impeachment trial of Donald Trump, the possibility of calling actual witnesses had seemed remote at best until 5 Republicans crossed the pond to skate with the Democrats. Couldn't have been Graham, could it? The managers had won the day in a rout, and the world could now learn precisely what Trump did and refused to do on that terrifying sixth day of January. By 3 p.m. that same afternoon, however, Trump had been acquitted of the charge of incitement to insurrection, with not one single witness having been called. 7 Republicans voted with the majority in favor of conviction, but the vote was still 10 short of the 17 Republicans needed to convict. With the abruptness of flicking a switch, it was over. I spent much of the remaining weekend in dark rooms, staring at my hands. Quote, "What am I using these for?" I kept asking myself. He's a writer, of course, so what he uses these for is writing. I kept asking myself. The quest for simple justice in this impossibly corrupt country is enough of a permanent burden without having victories, rare, precious victories, snatched away and discarded by the very people who worked so hard to secure them. I've been through my fair share of social and political traumas, but somehow the slammed lid ending to that second impeachment trial felt like the unkindest cut of all. And Jamie Raskin overcame a huge emotional burden. The recent loss of his son and the threat to his family when the Capitol was sacked, and he, along with his fellow impeachment managers, put on a presentation for the ages. Then, after succeeding beyond all expectations in securing Republican support for witness testimony, they gave away the store. Instead of bringing in witnesses to offer testimony, the managers made do with the statement from a single witness who described Trump as being deeply disdainful to those asking him to intervene in the violence. That was it. Thanks for coming. Turn out the lights when you leave. Quote, "The jury is ready to vote," unquote. Democratic Senator Chris Coons successfully urged the managers in his bid to end the trial. Quote, "People want to get home for Valentine's Day," unquote. And so it was that a manufactured holiday designed to make people, spend money in February got the drop on justice in the same building where they were still sweeping up the broken glass. Quote, "We have no regrets," Raskin later said on Meet the Press. And quote again, "We left it totally out there on the floor of the U.S. Senate, and every senator knew exactly what happened. We could have had 1,000 witnesses, but that could not have overcome the kinds of silly arguments that people like Mitch McConnell and Shelley Moore Capito were hanging their hats on," unquote. Representative Stacey Plaskett and Joe Neguse, 2 breakout stars from the manager's team, are taking a victory lap and looking toward a brighter future. But bully for them. While it is almost certainly true the Republicans would have voted to acquit Trump in the end, this misses the ultimate point by several nautical miles. Thanks, honey. An impeachment, quote, "trial," unquote, is really a hearing. And hearings are as much about politics as they are about the facts. The GOP has used hearings to transmit its mayhem arguments to the country to incredible effect over the years. Benghazi, your table is ready. But when Democrats won the opportunity to do the same, they spit the bit and talked about having no regrets. Far more went on during the events of January 6th than the people have been made aware of, or even after Raskin and the managers painted the walls of Congress with vivid imagery of a bloody coup barely avoided. Some 57 state and local Republican officials participated in the attack on that building. Trump himself offered support that was arguably tantamount to holding the Capitol doors open for the mob to charge through with nooses and zip ties. Witnesses would have told the police about that in necessarily excruciating detail. Witnesses were already lining up to do just that. Would it have altered the outcome? No more than the Benghazi hearings ultimately resulted in Hillary's arrest. But that is not the point of the exercise. Here I must stop for a second. It may be the Benghazi hearings did not result in Hillary Clinton's arrest, but they may well have resulted in her defeat in 2016, don't you think? They might have swung 2 or 3% of the voters over to Trump, the necessary 2 or 3% that would have allowed him to that did allow him to win. I don't know, but maybe. Going back to the piece, the GOP would have been forced to defend Trump and his people with a weight of witness testimony bearing down on them. And like as not, it would have served to further undermine the still too large power and influence enjoyed by our traitor former president. Much good would have come from the theater of it. And I have to agree. They underestimated the theater of it. After playing good theater themselves and making the case, they did not say to Chris Coons, Chris, the American people need the theater of this. They need to hear the testimony of people. It doesn't matter what the outcome is today. It matters what the country's going to think in 3 or 4 weeks or a month or 2 months. But instead, they threw the opportunity away, as William Rivers Pitts says. And how has the Republican Party reacted to that surprising bit of weekend largesse? They're outrageously accusing House Speaker Pelosi of being responsible for the inadequate protection of the Capitol on January 6th, when members of the pro-Trump mob ransacked her office and terrorized her staff. After spending a long, lethal year defending Trump's horrific failures in the face of COVID, Republicans are now seeking to capitalize on that pain by weaponizing, quote unquote, frustrated parents against President Biden. Quote, Republicans see room to capitalize on the grim public health and economic situation the White House inherited from Donald Trump by trying to put Democrats on the defensive for being too removed from the pain or too slow-moving to address it, reports Politico. In tandem, Republicans are lining up to thwart Biden's deeply needed and wildly popular relief package, which the administration hopes to deliver by March. Quote, Republicans are adrift at the moment, unquote, reports Punchbowl News. Quote, the lowest common denominator to get back on the same page will be opposing Biden and his agenda, especially a package of this size. We saw them do this in 2009 with the stimulus, and we expect the same thing here. And it's only Tuesday, says Pitt. President Harry Truman once asked, quote, how many times do you have to get hit over the head until you figure out who's hitting you, unquote. What happened last Saturday was a disgrace to the cause of freedom and truth. Yet another humiliation for a Democratic Party that never seems to miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. Instead, they stand there, backs turned, while the hits just keep on coming. Anyone who calls themselves a Democrat today should be embarrassed, and the Democratic leadership should be made to hear of it. Attempts to spin the conclusion of that trial as some sort of moral victory are laughable. The managers got right where they needed to be and then gave away the game ball because it was the easiest thing to do. Too many more, quote, victories, unquote, like that, and we'll be inaugurating Donald Trump again in 4 years. And I got to agree, they made a great case, but the witnesses would have driven it home, and would have swayed a few more Republicans too. I told you last time, I said they probably would have gotten another 4 or 5, probably would have come to 62 then. Wouldn't have been enough, but 62 would have been a lot more impressive than 57. Anyway, next up. Guess what happened to Donald Trump on the way to the forum, as the old saying goes. Trump faces first civil suit over role in inciting followers to attack the Capitol. By Chris Walker at Truth Out on February 16th. One Democratic congressman is using a rarely utilized Reconstruction-era law to sue former President Donald Trump over his role in instigating his supporters in the attack on the Capitol early last month. Representative Benny Thompson, Democrat of Mississippi, who was chair of the House Homeland Security Committee, is filing a personal civil suit against the former president over the breach of the Capitol building, which took place while Congress was certifying the results of the Electoral College, which Trump had lost. The lawsuit also names Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, and 2 hate groups, the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, that were involved in the breach of the Capitol as co-defendants. This is the first civil suit filed against Trump over his involvement in the attack against the Capitol, which came about after he wrongly assisted to his followers for months that the 2020 presidential election was rife with fraud, and held a rally on January 6th as the vote certification was going on, where he urged his loyalists to go to the Capitol itself to express their grievances in person over the election being, quote, stolen, unquote, from them. And by the way, Rush Limbaugh died today at 70, or was it yesterday? Not entirely clear on it. I won't tell you my first thought. Thompson, who is being aided by the NAACP in his civil suit against Trump, is utilizing a little-known federal statute passed in 1871 that was enacted in order to respond to violence from the Ku Klux Klan. How appropriate is that, folks? A law made for the Ku Klux Klan being applied to Trump. That is what I call poetic justice. Anyway, Walker goes on. The law allows civil litigation to proceed against individuals who use, quote, force, intimidation, or threats, unquote, to thwart anyone from upholding the duties of their government offices. That charge fits like a glove, doesn't it? Fits like a glove. That's exactly what he was doing. Trump and his allies, quote, acted in concert to spearhead the assault on the Capitol, while the angry mob that defendants Trump and Giuliani incited, descended on the Capitol, unquote, the lawsuit alleges. Suit goes on to say, the carefully orchestrated series of events that unfolded at the Save America rally and the storming of the Capitol was no accident or coincidence. It was the intended and foreseeable culmination of a carefully coordinated campaign to interfere with the legal process required to confirm the tally of votes cast in the Electoral College. Yes, indeed. The lawsuit also alleges that Trump was not acting within his official capacity as president, that he incited his followers to descend upon the Capitol, but rather was acting in a personal way. Joseph Sellers, a lawyer who was also helping Thompson with the lawsuit, explained that there is no possible way to interpret it differently. Quote, inciting a riot or attempting to interfere with the congressional efforts to ratify the results of the election that are commended by the Constitution could not conceivably be within the scope of ordinary responsibilities of the president, unquote. Sellers said in an interview about the lawsuit, quote, in this respect, because of his conduct, he is just like any other private citizen, unquote. That is a great legal argument. No way that could be conceivably construed as part of his responsibilities as president. No one can say he was acting as the president when he did that, and therefore was immune to prosecution. No, they can't say that, or immune to lawsuits. No. The lawsuit comes just a few days after Trump's acquittal by the Senate in his impeachment trial over his actions and statements leading up to and on January 6th. Thompson quoted Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell in his lawsuit, who encouraged litigation against Trump after voting against indicting him in the Senate impeachment trial. Quote, we have a criminal justice system in this country. We have civil litigation, and former presidents are not immune from being accountable by either one, McConnell said on the Senate floor after the trial's conclusion. During that trial, Trump's lawyers tried to argue that his First Amendment speech rights afforded him the ability to make incendiary statements. Many legal experts, however, have disagreed with that reasoning. Trump had a constitutional duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, Marjorie Cohn, Deputy Secretary General of the International Association of Democratic Lawyers, said in a recent op-ed she wrote for Truthout, quote, instead, he encouraged his toadies to violate the law by preventing Congress from fulfilling its constitutional duty to certify the duly chosen electoral votes. Indeed, the rioters succeeded in stopping and delaying the vote count as they stormed through the Capitol, unquote. Beyond Thompson's civil case filed this week, Cohn added, Trump's actions on that day, including the words he spoke and his failure for several hours to demand his followers stop attacking the Capitol may not shield him from any repercussions he may face in a future criminal case, should one be pursued. Quote, the First Amendment will not shield Trump from criminal liability in a criminal case either. The evidence is overwhelming, not only to have convicted Trump in the impeachment trial, but also to find him criminally guilty of inciting rebellion or insurrection and other federal and state offenses. And by the way, if Trump is prosecuted for inciting rebellion, or insurrection, either federally or in certain states, and he's convicted in such a trial, that is going to make the Republicans who voted not to convict him in the Senate look even more like the laughingstock they are. Can you imagine Trump being convicted and sent to jail and having these senators say that they couldn't convict him for high crimes and misdemeanors in the Senate? Recent polling on the matter, performed by Quinnipiac University following Trump's Senate acquittal, shows that most Americans find him at fault for what happened at the Capitol, with 54% saying he was responsible for inciting violence and only 43% saying he wasn't responsible. In addition to finding Trump at fault for the violence at the Capitol, 68% of respondents in the polls say that they don't believe the former president did everything he could to stop the breach of the Capitol immediately after it began. So, lawsuits, possible prosecution. And next up, we have from Common Dreams and John Kelly, staff writer, bring on the evidence, bring on the witnesses. After GOP refuses to convict, criminal prosecution of Trump demanded. Nice signs, jail to the chief. In the wake of Saturday's failure of the U.S. Senate to convict Donald Trump for his alleged incitement of the violent insurrectionist attack at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, by the way, the date on this article was February 15th, Monday. Legal experts, political observers, and government watchdogs are calling for criminal prosecution as the only remaining path for accountability and to prevent the disgraced former president from ever seeking elected office again. Writing for the Arizona Republic, columnist E.J. Montini argues that the Senate's refusal to convict has nothing to do with holding Trump to account in the nation's civilian justice system. The op-ed requires that if the adage, nobody is above the law, is true, then, quote, Trump should be charged with the exact same crime covered in the impeachment, only in criminal court. According to Montini, it's there under the U.S. Criminal Code, Title 18, Section 2383. The law is simple and straightforward. It reads, whoever incites, sets on foot, assists, or engages in any rebellion or insurrection against the authority of the United States or the laws thereof, or gives aid or comfort thereto, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 10 years or both, and shall be incapable of holding any office under the United States. There it is in the criminal code. Let Trump die in jail. That's not in the article. Following the acquittal, Noah Bookbinder, president of the watchdog group Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, CREW, called it, quote, a sad day for our democracy, unquote, but also suggested that Trump could still face prosecution in the courts. Trump incited an insurrection to overthrow the elected government of the United States. 43 senators stood with him. It does not end here, Bookbinder said in a statement. Quote again, a partisan minority of senators may have been willing to place loyalty to Donald Trump over loyalty to the United States of America, but that does not mean state and federal prosecutors will or that the American people will. Donald Trump's behavior was clearly criminal and was clearly abhorrent. He may have avoided one form of accountability, but he has not avoided all of them. The Associated Press reports, quote, now a private citizen, Trump is stripped of his protection from legal liability that the presidency gave him, unquote. And separate reporting over the weekend cited people close to Trump who said he is concerned about the prospect of prosecution, both related to the events of January 6th and other potential crimes. Quote, he's worried about it, unquote, one advisor close to Trump told CNN. As Lisa Gilbert, executive vice president of Public Citizen, put it, impeachment aside, Trump is unfit for future office and committed crimes against the American people. And whether through the courts, a commission, or other constitutional remedies, accountability will find him, unquote. In a CNN column Sunday, attorney and radio host Badin Obidala urged President Joe Biden to call for a, quote, full criminal investigation into the role Trump played in the January 6th insurrection effort. At the, quote, at the outset, wrote Obidala, and quote again, let's be clear that no criminal prosecution should ever be commenced for political reasons. That's illegal and truly un-American. Conversely, no prosecution should ever be rejected for political reasons either, such as hoping that by not prosecuting a political figure, it will foster more unity, quote unquote. That approach is just as wrong, unquote. He was hardly alone in making the argument that nothing in Trump's Senate acquittal, made only possible by the 43 Republican members in the minority who refused to convict, prevents federal prosecutors from bringing a criminal case against a disgraced former president. Investigating and, if necessary, prosecuting Trump for the many crimes he's alleged to have committed over these years isn't a political payback. It's simply the law doing its job against a potential felon, unquote, wrote Sasha Abramsky in The Nation on Sunday. In fact, he argued, quote again, given the myriad and very specific allegations swirling around Trump, it would be an example of clear, illegitimate favoritism at this point to not investigate the ex-president, unquote. Okay, and Abramsky continued, quote, bring on the evidence, bring on the witnesses. If Trump is innocent, be it of inciting a mob, of avoiding taxes, or of threatening election officials, his top flight lawyers will get every opportunity to prove their case, including by letting Trump himself take the stand to explain and justify his actions. But if the weight of evidence points to his malfeasance, and if juries find him to be guilty, surely even McConnell, who so cynically voted to acquit Trump and then immediately announced he held the man responsible for the lethal acts of January 6th, couldn't really object to the historical records being set just a little bit straight. In 2019, the HuffPost op-ed calling for Trump to be prosecuted in court for his many alleged crimes to the, quote, fullest extent of the law, unquote. Jeff Hauser, co-director of the Revolving Door Project, wrote, the era of Trumpism will not be, the end of Trumpism will not be when Trump is defeated at the polls or even when he is impeached. It will be when America comes together as a nation and acts to ensure that elites like Trump who transgress against our shared laws suffer consequences proportionate to their actions. On Sunday morning, following the president's acquittal by the Senate, Hauser linked to his op-ed and tweeted, quote, I wrote this piece 25 months ago, and I stand by it, unquote. And the final piece on after impeachment. A reminder from Truth Out that Congress has a constitutional path to bar Trump from office if the trial fails. And there is Susan Collins saying a word to Tim Kaine in front of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee on May 7th, 2020 in Washington, D.C. This one is by Jared Magliacca from The Conversation, and it was published on January 31st, 2021. Until recently, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment was an obscure part of the U.S. Constitution. The amendment is better known for its first section, which guaranteed individual rights and equality following the abolition of slavery. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment was created to tackle a different problem related to the Civil War, insurrection. It prohibits current or former military officers, along with many current and former federal, state, and public officials, from serving in a variety of government offices if they, quote, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion, unquote, against the United States Constitution. This section was created after the Civil War as part of the 14th Amendment to bar military officers and civil officials who joined the Confederacy from serving in government again. Now, this provision is cited in the article of impeachment against former U.S. President Donald Trump, introduced after the insurrectionist violence at the Capitol on January 6, 2021. An impeachment trial is slated to begin in the Senate on February 8th. Even if the trial is called off or acquits Trump, some senators are considering a resolution invoking Section 3 of the 14th Amendment in an effort to bar him from holding future office. Right after the passage of the 14th Amendment in 1868, Section 3 was enforced vigorously. For example, Congress directed the Union Army to oust any former Confederate officials then holding office in ex-Confederate states still under martial law. It is estimated that tens of thousands of men were made ineligible to serve by Section 3. Congress then enacted by legislation as part of the first Ku Klux Klan Act in 1870, giving the Justice Department authority to bring lawsuits in federal court to enforce Section 3 against former Confederate officials still holding office in other states. 3 justices on Tennessee's Supreme Court were sued under this law. One resigned. The other 2 contested their ineligibility in court. North Carolina and Louisiana also enforced Section 3 in court, upholding in 1869 a dismissal of some state officials who had served the Confederacy, including a sheriff, a constable, and a district attorney. In 1871, after the North Carolina legislature elected their Civil War-era governor, Zebulon Vance, to the Senate deemed him ineligible to serve under Section 3. The state legislature was forced to choose someone else. Less than 5 years into Reconstruction, however, many Northerners began calling on Congress to grant amnesty to Southern officers barred from office by Section 3. The 14th Amendment gives Congress the power to restore the right to hold office with a two-thirds vote in each chamber. This campaign, led by the prominent New York newspaper editor Horace Greeley, reflected white fatigue with the burdens of enforcing the entire 14th Amendment and a desire to move past the bitterness of the Civil War. Greeley and his, quote, liberal Republicans, unquote, mounted a presidential campaign in 1872 based in part on a platform of universal amnesty, quote unquote. President Ulysses S. Grant, who was running for re-election, knew white public opinion now favored amnesty. In December 4th, 1871 message to Congress, he asked lawmakers to grant amnesty to former Confederate officials. After a long and emotional debate, Congress did so in 1872 with the General Amnesty Act. Some Southern voters sent many previously disqualified men back to Congress, including Alexander Stephens, the former Confederate vice president, Confederate President Jefferson Davis, and a few hundred other former federal officials and military officers remained excluded from public office. In granting this amnesty, Congress rejected a proposal by Massachusetts Senator Charles Sumner, an eloquent advocate for racial equality, to couple forgiveness for white Southerners with a new civil rights law that, among other things, have barred racial discrimination in schools. In 1898, with the Spanish-American War about to begin, Congress removed Section 3 ineligibility from all living ex-rebels. It was widely seen as another gesture of unity, gave national unity, but it was another nail in the coffin of Reconstruction. During the 20th century, Section 3 was largely ignored. It was used just once during World War I to exclude the socialist congressman Victor Berger from the House for his anti-war speeches. In the 1970s, Congress gave Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis posthumous Section 3 amnesty. This was again done in the name of national reconciliation after the divisive Vietnam War. I guess I don't understand why. I don't understand what Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis had to do with the Vietnam War. Excuse me, I didn't even remember that. And I don't understand the connection now. I don't know how that helped unify the country. Today, Section 3, created to vanquish white supremacy, is seeing a revival. The Confederate flag, which never entered the Capitol during the Civil War, was carried inside during the January 6th Capitol insurrection. Any congressional members, I have to say, folks, I don't consider that trivial. I don't consider that to be trivial at all. That the Confederate flag was carried inside the Capitol of the United States. That is, in my mind, a high crime and misdemeanor. Any congressional members determined to have engaged in insurrection may be expelled under this provision by a two-thirds vote in their House of Congress. And maybe it wasn't the Confederate flag. Perhaps it was only the Virginia battle flag. That's often mistaken for the Confederate flag. Anyway, that includes potentially lawmakers who are found to have directly aided or incited the rioters. Capitol Police are investigating several Republican congressional representatives for allegedly leading reconnaissance, quote unquote, tours of the building on January 5th. Oh, yeah, I'd love to find out the truth about that. By the way, that would have been found out if witnesses had been called. That would have come up. Though lawmakers can remove their colleagues from office, they cannot legally keep those members from running for and occupying public office again. That's because there is today no federal statute enforcing Section 3. Those parts of the Ku Klux Klan Act were repealed long ago. Unless Congress passes a new enforcement law, any expelled lawmakers could return later. Similarly, Congress could at any time use Section 3 to declare its constitutional opinion that Trump is ineligible to hold public office again with a majority vote. But only the courts interpreting Section 3 for themselves can bar someone from running for president. The issue may never come up. The Senate may disqualify Trump first as part of impeachment, or he may choose not to run again. If he does run, though, he may have to take his case to the Supreme Court. A bipartisan congressional opinion, of ineligibility would be a big blow to his candidacy. It would be. So, what happens after impeachment is a multidimensional situation. It is a situation, excuse me a bit. There we go. Just a small adjustment. It is something that can be pursued and will be pursued in many different ways. We haven't heard the last when it comes to holding Donald Trump accountable. We're going to hear about a lot more, I think, especially from the Attorney General, of New York State. God bless her soul. Anyway, moving on from this subject to the second one that suddenly came up today that I wanted to talk about. It was fallout from the town hall in Milwaukee last night, which I could not see because I was here. I was live streaming here, so I could not catch the town hall. But, of course, by now you've all heard about it. It's been a big fuss this morning. That's the kind of screw up. If Biden had screwed up that way during the campaign, it's a lucky thing they hit him. That they hit him. Because if he had screwed up that way during the final stages of the campaign, having a town hall with somebody, and somebody like that had asked him about forgiving student debt, and he had replied in that way, he might have lost Georgia. He might have lost in other states where the vote of people who owe huge amounts of student debt is very, very important. Student debt is a killer issue. He doesn't understand the intensity which people have for that issue. People who have had student debts hang over their heads for 30 and 40 years. Unforgivable debts, never to be forgiven. Can't escape them in bankruptcy. No way out. I have a friend whose brother incurred some student debts. Last time I talked to my friend about this must have been 5 years ago, 6 years ago. We were just talking. He mentioned his brother, student debts, and so on. His brother was like 53, 54. He didn't have anything in life. He had been, I believe, a social worker, someone serving the public. He could never get on top of those student debts. It wasn't his fault. He'd been sick, ill. Misfortunes. Misfortunes hit people. Some people have situations where their kids can't pay the debts, and they find themselves liable at 50 or 55 or 65 to pay student debts. You know the story by now. This piece appeared in Common Dreams today, Jake Johnson. Keep pushing, quote unquote. Says AOC after Biden tells nation, I will not cancel $50,000 in student loan debt. What does he think he's doing? Does he think he's playing Bill Clinton? Talking about Sister Soldier? Is this his Sister Soldier moment? It's not about Sister Soldier, you turkey. It's about millions of people having these huge debts after the government urged people to take student loans, go to college, get a good education, because it was good for the country, and the education would pay them back. You know that story too, but it's a valid story. The government was involved in the promotion of people going to these schools and incurring student loan debt in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Some of them owe in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Even 50,000 wouldn't begin to approach the debt. Biden has the authority to forgive all of the debt without Congress. He has his Senate Majority Leader in favor of his canceling $50,000 in student loan debt, pleading with him to cancel it. He has a senior senator in the Democratic Party, specifically Elizabeth Warren, co-sponsoring that bill, joining with Schumer to urge him to cancel the student debt, putting in a bill of their own to cancel the $50,000 in student loan debt per borrower. And he said he will not make that happen. He said he will not make that happen. He was asked if he would make $50,000 of student loan debt go away. He said, no, he will not make that happen. Why? Why? Because, well, it depends on whether it's private or public. Whether there was a private college involved or a public college involved. Is he saying that it was somehow a sin to go to a private school when you could have gone to a public school and incurred less debt? Weren't people being urged to go to the best school they could so that they could get the best jobs they could? Weren't they being told that that's what was going to pay off for them? And he asked the question, should he forgive people who went to elite colleges like Harvard, Yale, and Penn, or use that money for early childhood ed? He did say he would forgive 10K of the student debt, but he also said he didn't have the authority to forgive 50K. Have you ever heard anything so stupid? He can forgive 10K, but it wouldn't be legal for him to forgive 50K or forgive more. 10 is okay, but 50 is not. Why do you suppose he did this? Why do you suppose he was reasoning like this? Could it possibly be that poor Joe Biden, went to the University of Delaware for a bachelor's degree and then had to go to Syracuse University and not go to Yale or Penn or Harvard Law because he couldn't afford it? So he had to go to Syracuse and get a degree. And then for the rest of his career, he was always looked down upon by people who had gone to Yale or Harvard or Princeton or some other Ivy League school. And then when he finally got to the cabinet, when he finally got to the vice presidency, he had the Harvard people and the Yale people and the Princeton people. You've heard all the stories. Look down on Joe, ignorant Joe, who didn't go to one of the Ivies. Is it possible that this is finally Joe Biden's revenge on people who went to the Ivies? He's not going to forgive their student loan debt? Is this what it's about? He points out, I'm ready to support completely free tuition to go to community college. I'm ready to support free tuition for people who want to go to state schools, but not who want to go to private schools, for families with an income up to $125,000. Tell me, Joseph, is there a reason why there isn't a cost of living adjustment in there? I mean, people who make $125,000 in the middle of Kansas are rich. People who make $125,000 a year in New York City probably can't even get a decent apartment. Anyway, back to Ocasio-Cortez. She says, she was one among many progressives who pushed back against the president's false narrative about who would benefit from the move and urged advocates to keep up the pressure. Biden said, I will not make that happen. That poor Wisconsin student who said the debt was crushing her family, friends, and millions of Americans. The president went on to say he doesn't want to forgive billions of dollars of debt for people who've gone to Harvard and Yale and Penn, instead of using that money to provide money for early education for young children from disadvantaged circumstances. Who told him there was a choice in that matter? Who told him that he could only fund either that student loan forgiveness or support for early childhood education. Ocasio-Cortez argued, there's no reason the wealthiest nation on the planet can't both fund early childhood education and forgive some of the combined $1.8 trillion of student loan debt saddling more than 40 million Americans. Nowhere does it say we must trade off early childhood education for student loan debt forgiveness. Ocasio-Cortez tweeted late Tuesday, quote, we can have both, unquote. She also rejected the notion attendees of Harvard, Yale, and other elite schools should categorically be denied student loan relief, noting many people from working-class families attended such prestigious schools and are now saddled with debt due to their inability to afford the sky-high costs. And Brianna Joy Gray makes the very valid point that people who go to the elite schools, who can afford to pay the tuition at the elite schools, do not take student loans. The only people who take out student loans at these elite schools are people who cannot afford them without taking the student loans. The fact that they concluded the student loans is enough evidence for concluding that their families needed the money. And this schmuck assumes that it's a valid means test that they went to Harvard, Yale, and other elite universities. Or maybe he thinks they should have just made the same choice he did and gone to Syracuse University. By the way, a fine university Syracuse University is. I'm in no way looking down on Syracuse University. They've produced many, many fine graduates and researchers. And I personally think, having gone to one of the Ivies, that the Ivies are generally speaking overrated. How do I know they're overrated? Because many of the professors at other schools, at these other schools that are no longer Ivies, are taught by people from the Ivy League schools. Are you saying that the students who teach at other schools than the Ivy League schools are not as good as the Ivy League people? Come on. Stephanie Kelton taught for years at University of Kansas City. I'm sorry, but University of actually Missouri at Kansas City. Are you telling me she's not as good as an economist as almost anybody in the Harvard economics department? She now teaches at SUNY Stony Brook, okay, another fine school, but it's not an Ivy. Are you saying that her students are not going to be as good economists as the ones who go to Harvard, Yale, and other universities? No, I think it's fine to go to these other schools. But you can't get around the fact that if someone wants a job on Wall Street or at the finest of law firms, the way society runs today, people think there's great advantage to go to one of the Ivies. And especially was that true when many of them incurred their debts, people now in their 30s and their 40s and their 50s. That Ivy League ticket was so important. And you want to know how important it is? How many people in the administration right now have those Ivy League tickets? Even right now, who are Biden's appointees? Most of them are the Ivy League people that he felt were looking down on him before. Anyway, I can understand where he's coming from on this. But as Ocasio-Cortez said, who cares what school someone went to? Entire generations of working class kids were encouraged to go into more debt under the guise of elitism. This is wrong, unquote. Quote again, the case against student loan forgiveness is looking shakier by the day. Biden's holding back, but many of the arguments against it just don't hold water on close inspection. We can and should do it. Keep pushing, unquote. And I say keep pushing. By the way, I never owed a penny in student loan debt. I went through school before the days of student loans. And tuition was low enough that when I had to work to get through school, I could work in order to get through school. Not that most of my expenses weren't paid by my parents, they were. And I was lucky enough that my parents were wealthy enough that they could send me at that time. My brother wasn't so fortunate. My family ran into economic difficulties when I was in graduate school and able to support myself there on assistantships. So I didn't need to have them help me anymore. However, my brother was not so lucky. He didn't get to complete his college work. He didn't get to be supported. He had to go into business. It's been tougher for him than it was for me, for various reasons. But that's neither here nor there. Keep pushing. AOC is right. In lieu of canceling $50,000 in student loan debt per borrower, a proposal backed by Schumer and Warren and other prominent lawmakers, Biden said he wants to write off $10,000 a person, make community college free, eliminate state school tuition for people earning less than $125,000 a year. While he presented his proposals as sensible and pragmatic alternatives to unilateral debt cancellation, racial justice activist Bree Newsom argued, quote, there's nothing practical about Biden's stance on student loan forgiveness. It's just an ideological stance on being moderate that isn't informed by what makes sense from either an economic, gender, or racial justice standpoint. That's why he's out of step with other Dems on this. Why do we have to choose between student loan debt forgiveness and funding childhood education? She asked. Of course. What does the 10K cap have to do with borrowers from elite schools? Why are we excluding elite schools? There are a bunch of first-generation students of color at elite schools, unquote. What does the 10K cap have to do with anything? What does the 50K cap have to do with anything? What's magic about those numbers? Where did they come from? Whose butt did they come out of? Anyway, Vanessa B., an editor at Current Affairs, offered a similar, albeit more sharply worded critique on Twitter. This was great. If you came from a working class family, fought your way into Brown, but couldn't secure enough grants, but that's the university, Brown University, but couldn't secure enough grants to avoid borrowing, Biden's got a foot to shove up your ass. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. I should have entitled this one, Biden's got a foot to shove up your ass. That's what, that was some plastic bottle making noise, I'm sure. Okay, so we heard some plastic snapping in the background. So that was incredible. That was such a politically stupid answer. And it was dishonest. It was dishonest because nobody believes that he was telling us the truth about the legality of his canceling $50,000 in student loan debt. Hundreds of legal experts have already said he had the authority to do it. And there's no legal basis for saying he has the authority to cancel 10K of it. But he doesn't have the authority to cancel 50K of it, or 100K of it, or 150K of it, okay, if necessary. Everybody also knows he has the authority to reduce the interest rates on those loans to zero. Tomorrow he could do that. Bree Joy Gray on the Rising program today pointed out many people are paying 8% on those loans. Year after year after year, they're paying 8% on those loans. And the 8% in many cases is going to the government because the government owns that. What does the government do with the 8%? I got a secret for you. It's an MMT secret. When the money hits, when the money is deposited by the Treasury and it hits the Federal Reserve account of the Treasury, that interest money is destroyed. It might just as well never have been created by the federal government. It comes back from the private sector as interest from those former students. And the federal government, that is the Federal Reserve, just destroys the money in the act of settlement. My friends, that is the God's honest truth about what happens. Biden lied. People have told him that he had the authority to do this legally. He doesn't have the right to say that he doesn't have the legal authority to do it without quoting chapter and verse who told him he had the legal authority and who told him he didn't have the legal authority and what their respective arguments were. Because his position on this, his position that he can't do so legally, is controversial. It's controversial. It's most probably wrong. Most legal experts who've been quoted on this say he has a perfect right to do this legally. He needs to explain himself because he seems to have told a barefaced lie. Let him call on Lawrence Tribe of Harvard University and ask Larry Tribe whether he thinks Biden has the authority to cancel student loan debt if he thinks it's best for the country. Let him ask Tribe publicly in front of all of us. I challenge him to do so. Liar, liar, pants on fire. But legal experts have said the president clearly has the authority to direct the Secretary of Education to cancel $50,000 in loan debt without congressional approval a move that a majority of Americans support. And Eileen Connor, Dean Noonan, and Toby Merrill of the Project on Predatory Student Lending wrote that, quote, broader categorical debt cancellation would be a lawful and permissible exercise of the Secretary's authority under existing law. Quote, yes, POTUS does have the authority to cancel student debt with a stroke of a pen, said Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, Democrat of Massachusetts, the leading House sponsor of a resolution urging Biden to forgive $50,000 in student debt, tweeted late Wednesday. He can, quote, he can and must use it. The people deserve nothing less. In a joint statement Wednesday morning, Warren and Schumer said that an ocean of student loan debt is holding back 43 billion borrowers and disproportionately weighing down Black and brown Americans, unquote. Presidents Obama and Trump used their executive authority to cancel student loan debt, the senators noted. Canceling $50,000 in student loan debt will help close the racial wealth gap, benefit the 40% of borrowers who do not have a college degree, and help stimulate the economy. It's time to act. We will keep fighting, unquote. So there it is. But I also have to ask, why is Biden wanting, why is Biden thinking that there is a trade-off between childhood ed and student loan debt in any particular, in any dimension? Doesn't he yet understand that the fiscal capability of the federal government is easily able to handle both of those things? It makes no difference to the federal budget if the $1.6 trillion, I guess it is now, of student loan debt is forgiven tomorrow. It doesn't count against the federal budget. It doesn't count against, it's not $1.6 trillion that's going to be taken out of the Treasury spending account. That's not what's going to happen. The Treasury account balance is going to be the same the day after he does it as it was the day that he does do it. And if the Treasury needs more money the week after that, or the week after that, or the week after that, it is always capable of getting that money. Always capable. The government of the United States is a monetary sovereign. Once Congress appropriates that money, the executive branch alone has the capability to get the Federal Reserve to top up its spending account to produce the money needed to spend congressional mandates, whatever they are. No money has to come out of the Treasury to do this. We're all talking smoke and mirrors here. We're talking smoke and mirrors. We're not talking about depriving the federal government of any money it otherwise might have and otherwise might use for childhood ed. He can legislate for childhood ed, and he can forgive student loan debt on his own authority according to what is allowed in current law. So I have to echo I have to echo both Sagar and Jetty and Brejoy Gray on this. Sagar says, why hide behind procedure? Why do Biden and the Democrats always try to hide behind procedure as an excuse for not doing things? Why do they always say, oh, the filibuster? Oh, reconciliation, we got to do this according to reconciliation. Oh, we can't go against these rules, we're always bound by the rules. If you say you're always bound by the rules, and as a result, you can't get done what people really need you to have done, then the people are going to say, to hell with your rules. We don't give a damn about your rules. And that's what makes people turn to demagogues like Donald Trump. When you let the rules get the best of you, when you let the rules that make no sense to anybody else except you prevent you from passing things that people need. Now, I know rules are important when breaking rules results in people's deaths. Rules are important to have an orderly society. We all know that. But rules that make sense to no one, like the filibuster. Rules that make sense to no one, like the bird rule. Procedures that make sense to no one, like not using the authority you have to cancel student debt when you have that authority, and instead you hide behind procedure and you say, well, I think it's better if Congress does it. We don't believe that those procedures are at all important. They are not as important as the death from suicide of one student loan debtor. Not one of these rules is that important. They're only things you people hide behind. That's why Trump won in 2016. Because you wouldn't do what you said you were going to do, and you hid behind procedure to avoid doing it. Obama disappointed people en masse. And he did it while hiding behind procedure. And you're doing the same thing right now. And then I have to echo Bree. She says, stop lying about it. Stop lying about it. Some of us oldsters, like me, have a little more tolerance for lying, having seen it go on for years and years and years, and having seen people not call politicians to account for doing it. There was a survey that crossed my desk today. It was from some of your groups, Joseph. And what it said was, Joe, it referred to me as Joe. My name is Dr. Firestone to you. It said, Joe, what do you think of Joe Biden so far? I said, unsure. Unsure. It asked me a few more questions. I said, unsure. I kept saying unsure. Why did I keep saying unsure? Because he won't stop lying about what he wants to do. That's why. That's a big reason why. He won't stop lying. He won't stop lying. Stop lying, Joseph. That's the best thing you can do. At this point, tell the truth. You have the authority. You don't want to do it. Tell people the truth about why you don't want to do it. You know why you should tell them the truth? So it can be debated. Because why don't you want to do it? We know why you don't want to do it. You still want to play the means testing game. When it comes to student debt, you want to play the means testing game. Well, Bree Joy Gray had a suggestion for you there too. And it's the same as my suggestion. And that suggestion would be tax it back, Joe. If the families can afford it, tax it back. You can get it back by taxing it back. Raise taxes, Joe, and you can get it back. You don't have to means test on the front end. On the front end, you have to presume the people need it, because otherwise, why the hell would they go get a loan that they were going to have to pay 8% on? Why the hell would they take that loan that they might have to owe for years and years and years, and that could never be discharged in bankruptcy? Why would they do that? They must have needed it, Joe. But if they didn't, you can always get it back afterwards. So one more piece on this. One other opinion that it would be nice to have. And that opinion is from Dave Dayen. Where are you, Dave? I guess you're here. This one is mostly about small business relief. We'll get to that, another time. But here's Dave's take on that town hall. Joe Biden did a workmanlike job at a town hall in Milwaukee last night, showing appropriate empathy and reasonableness, completely out of character with how the job was performed in the previous 4 years. On policy, there were a couple of flashpoints. Biden will get a lot of heat from the left for rejecting the cancellation of up to $50,000 in student debt, while agreeing to his campaign promise of a token $10,000 in cancellation and saying, "I don't think I have the authority," quote unquote, to do it by executive order. By lumping in debt cancellation with people who've gone to Harvard and Yale, Biden employed a misdirection tactic, that is to say, not to put words in his mouth, but employed a misdirection tactic, that is, was dishonest, that doesn't reflect the overwhelming majority of student borrowers. Yeah, it was another lie. Misdirecting towards Harvard and Yale and Penn graduates, that was another lie. According to a Color of Change survey, 56% of black voters carry student debt, with more than half of them well over $10,000 in balances. And this is preventing them from owning a home, moving to a better neighborhood, or even retiring. Preventing people from retiring. Student debt preventing people from retiring. Do you know in Babylon they forgave debts every 7 years? We are worse than Babylon. Rejecting large-scale debt cancellation is actually a racial justice issue. But I don't want to dwell on that question today because another one slipped by without much notice. And it speaks to some bad implementation on the part of the Biden team that they need to get fixed for the future of the economy and our society, really. And then Dave goes on to talk about the Paycheck Protection Program and small business, which I don't want to go in tonight. I did want to get his take, though, on the student loan debt issue. I personally think he has vastly underestimated the importance of that issue. I think it's one of these things people feel really intensely about. They feel the way they have been treated, many for years and years and years, is usury. That it is usury. That's what they think it is. And they think the federal government has been part of it and now owns most of the outstanding student debt. 80 to 85% of it is owned by the federal government. The usurer is the federal government. Being willing to give during a pandemic zero interest loans to big businesses while collecting 8% from student loan borrowers. The real truth of the matter is that many student loan borrowers have paid more than they would have paid for the student loan over and over and over again because of usurious interest rates on those loans compared to the credit business was getting. To keep them under the thumb, to keep them down for years and years and years and years, and do much to ruin their lives. It's ridiculous. It has to end, and it has to end now. And by the way, everybody, cut the $50,000 crap. Let's just have the total forgiveness of all student loans. And if you got to take something back from someone, do it afterwards through taxation. But for now, just get those loans off people's backs. We need that $1.6 trillion worth of loans plus interest going back into the economy so the economy can recover. We don't need that money going to the federal government each year in payments, with those payments being destroyed by the Federal Reserve. We don't need that happening. We need people to be free and not to be held down. The working class people and the middle class people who needed those loans so they could go to good schools, so they could go to not so good schools, so they could go. There are many people even who, while they were working, wanted a degree. They had a bachelor's. They wanted but to get a graduate degree so they could get ahead. And they took student loans to go to places like Phoenix College, Phoenix University, whatever it's called now, okay, and Capella University, and places like that. A few years ago, I had one of them who was taking a PhD, okay, in knowledge management, have me on her committee. Because even though, okay, I'm not an academic anymore, I was one at one time. So I could sit on a PhD committee. And I sat on her PhD committee. And of course, I heard her stories about how many years she'd been in school trying to get such a degree, how it would improve her prospects, how she might be able to get a teaching job herself, how much she wanted it instead of the kind of job she had. And she paid for that degree. She paid through the nose for that online degree from an online accredited school while she worked her tail off during the day, and she incurred these huge student loans, and she got her PhD. And I don't know if she ever really even got a job out of it. But when I heard what those schools were charging tuition and what that cost her over 4 or 5 years, it was a crime. It was a crime. It was a racket. Those are the kinds of student loans that would be forgiven for many people. This has to happen. Okay, I've gone on for long enough about this. Thank you for being here and listening to my rants tonight. I'm going to go through your comments. Carmen Muniz says, I've lost all comments earlier than 9:17. I have no idea why. I know there were comments before 9:17 because I read some, so I know they were there. But evidently, they've disappeared. So, forgive me for not reading anything before, actually 9:18. I lost the one at 9:17. So Lana's is the first comment. She says, hey all, an old gringo is back. Hi, Lance. And says, hi all. Steve says, these idiots film themselves without masks. Laugh out loud. Stupid is as stupid does. Carmen Muniz says, oh, is this about the NAACP KKK case? Yeah, one of them is. It's about the Benny, I forget the congressman's last name. Benny Thompson, I think it is. Steve Wolfbrand said, can't stop laughing. Steve Gonzo says, Tennessee. Carmen says, Steve Wolfbrand must be Antifa. Hey, Carmen, watch out. There's a commission coming. Nancy Pelosi is going to have a 9/11 commission. We know about those types of commissions. They're very dangerous. Who knows what they might do to Antifa, just to be fair. I mean, they're boundless concern for fairness. So if they do something really nasty to the fascists, they might decide, oh, we really got to do something very nasty to Antifa. So don't accuse anybody of being Antifa. As far as you know, Carmen, you don't know any Antifa. Kay says, there were a few from Ohio too, I heard. And if you tell people I'm Antifa, I'll deny it. Carmen Muniz says, good riddance, Limburger. Limburg. Gee, I won't say various things I could say. I don't want to speak ill of the dead. I don't want to speak ill of the dead unless I have to speak ill of the dead. I don't have to speak ill of the dead anymore because he's not an issue. Steve Wolfbrand said, they caught the idiot from UCLA today. Which idiot from UCLA? Carmen Muniz says, yes, poetic justice. And Steve Wolfbrand said, Trump told them all not to wear masks. Now they're all busted. I'd be pissed. Laugh out loud. I'd be turning state's evidence to go after Trump if I were them. Ohio's number 2 in malicious state groups, says Steve Gonzo. Yeah, Case told us that before. Steve Wolfbrand said, next time you do a felony, wear a mask. Yeah, the outlaws in the Old West knew that. Hell, they could have worn those, The balaclavas, or whatever they're called, they would have been unrecognizable. And hats. Who was that masked man? And Carmen says, guys, I found a well-made sticky tab with a metal ring on it that you can stick on the back of your phone. Sticks like a Gorilla Glue. Slip your finger in it to hold your phone better. I added a lariat and can hang it around my neck. It's awesome. Only $1.
Where did you get it for?
Amazing. Oh, so where did you get that for $1, Carmen? Bonnie wants to know that. Probably at the dollar store. Kay says, I know, Steve Gonzo. That is too sad in itself. Carmen says, shh. No, we want them to go down, not make more racists. Steve says, there are no coincidences. Supposedly died on the 17th. Think critically. 17 is Q. Rush is. Hashtag MAGA non. Headline to my condolence post. Hashtag MAGA non. Kay says, would love to see him go to jail. Same. Steve says, apparently they never watched a Western movie. Nah, Western movies are too old-fashioned for them. All they watch is Viking movies. Steve Whitmer says, yet can't rib a stagecoach without a bandana. Carmen says, save, correction. Zorro. Rob, not save, not rib, corrections. Kay says, the first thing we all learned when I protested in the late 60s was to stay away from the cops and the TV cameras, laugh out loud. And Steve Day says, yay, catching you all live. Hey, Steve Day. Carmen Muniz says, yes, that's the number one rule in the hood as well. Evelina says, could it be DT just wanted to go out with a big bang, loyal to his twisted idea of celebrity status? Hey, Evelina, great to see you. Steve said, Trump told them he would go with them to the Capitol, then went home and watched it on TV. I find the whole thing very funny, AF. Yeah, he went home and watched it on TV. What a gutless wonder. And he's still their hero. He's still their hero. They got a gutless wonder for their hero. He won't even march at the head. Yeah, like, you know, there's the statue, okay, of Miss Celebrity leading the rebellion. Yeah, you know, the French Revolution of painting, you know, of Miss Liberty leading the rebellion, and Madam Liberty. Well, Trump didn't have the courage to lead the revolution. Evelina says it was a crazy, mad thing to do. In contrast, when Bernie supports a strike or supports an action, he marches with them. He marches with them. He would have done that as president of the United States too. Imagine if Bernie was the president now, he'd be down there in Alabama marching with them. Can you imagine that? I can.
I bet schools would be free too.
Steve Gonzo. Yeah, I'll bet student debt would have been forgiven by now. If you characters had voted for Bernie in the primary, you wouldn't have any student debt today. We wouldn't be shouting and screaming at student debt. We wouldn't be telling Biden what an idiot he is, because we wouldn't care what an idiot he is. I mean, to take the position he took, not only did he lie, not only did he misdirect, not only was he being disingenuous, but also he was being stupid politically and morally wrong. How could anybody produce such a terrible response? Evelina says, after all. Steve Gonzo said there's 74 million of those idiots and they aren't going anywhere. Kay says, very true, Steve. March 4th is coming right up. Steve Wolfbrand said, Feinstein has lost her marbles and probably doesn't even know her own name. She filed papers to run again. We're fucked. Well, maybe they'll have sense enough to beat her in the primary. She can run again, but that's in 2022. By 2022, it might be quite apparent she doesn't know her own name. She might actually lose the primary to Shahed Buttar. What about that? What a thought. Kay says she needs to retire. Old Gringo says, well, the Civil War never ended. It just went political after the war. The war continued on in the political arena. I know. And when we had a chance to finish them in the 1870s, we didn't finish them. We got tired. We should have finished them then. We got another chance to finish them again during the 1960s. And then we had a few assassinations and we got tired. We didn't follow through. Steve says, they needed the rebel soldiers and officers to invade Mexico. The Southerners were better soldiers, still are. I'm sorry, Steve, they're not better soldiers than kids from Brooklyn. No way in hell. They never were. Old Gringo says, by the way, I'm great-great-grandson of both Union and Confederate soldiers. Not that it matters. And Carmen says, hell, one guy beat up the Capitol Police 3 times and they didn't arrest him. Well, I don't know who's to blame for that. That kind of utter stupidity escapes me. Old Gringo says, 2 different families back then hadn't married each other till the 1940s. 2 different branches. Yeah, that was understandable. Steve Day says, glad to hear investigation of January 5th Capitol tours. Old Gringo says, I don't know how the 60s in Vietnam had anything to do with the U.S. Civil War. That escapes me too, laugh out loud. Yeah, wasn't that ridiculous? At least they took Donald Trump's helipad away in Mar-a-Lago, and his casino got razed to the ground in Jersey. Oh, you mean the one in Atlantic City? Communist Biden is a dumbass. Yeah, I mean, he is, What kind of politician does that? What kind of politician thinks this is a sister soldier movement versus the student loan debtors? He's playing sister soldier with the student loan debtors. He's actually playing Bill Clinton. That's the trouble. He's still living in the 90s. Joe, go back even further. You're almost old enough to remember the New Deal. At least its end. Why don't you act like a New Dealer? And forget about Sister Soldier. Yes? Yes, I see. Now, Bonnie's telling me it's 24. That means it's almost as cold here as it is in Ohio. Kay says, I watched Don Lemon after this last night to catch parts of it. They won Georgia by promising immediate $2,000 checks. Effing liars. Yes, Steve, you're right. Carmen says, I hear you can't retire and collect SS if you have student debt. I don't know if that's true. I can't speak to that because, as I said, I never had student debt, so the issue never came up for me. Never came up for me. I don't know. But I think if they're collecting student debt from Social Security recipients, it's a scandal. Kay says people are having their Social Security checks taken for student debt. That's incredible. Steve Volkran said, you borrowed 20 grand, you owe 60 grand. Yeah. Old Gringo says, great point about the U.S. government encouraging student loans. They were for years and years and years. Everybody knew it. Yeah. I mean, what they would say is, oh, you can go to college, we got the Pell Grants, and then you can take student loans. And you can take student loans. How many people fell for that? And they said, oh, there'll be jobs for you, as they were exporting the jobs out of the United States. Kay says, thankfully, I am debt-free for the first time in years. Kay, great. You did great. Steve says, hey, I don't talk shit about Elizabeth Warren. She's an indigenous Indian chief. Carmen says, 50K would cut into his donors' predatory profits from student loans. Well, not much, really, because they only own, 15% of student loans. The government owns 85% of student loans. He'd be cutting into the government's predatory profits that go nowhere, that get destroyed by the Federal Reserve upon receipt. Steve Wilbrand said, I pay cash for everything. Zero debt, no credit score, but I sleep well at night. So, Steve, how can you rent a car if you have to rent a car? But don't you need a credit card for that? Don't you then get a credit score? Kay says, I hear you. Kay says, I had to take care of Scott and I for a year more and ran out my credit card after he got too sick to work. Steve Wolfbrand said, 125,000 ain't shit here. It ain't shit in New York either. Carmen says, excellent catch by Brianna Joy. Yeah, Brianna Joy Gray's a lawyer, and she's got student debt. She knows all about it. Steve Wolfbrand said, a woman friend said the bank told her she can't afford a $950 mortgage, but she rents a one-bedroom apartment for $1,400 a month. That's life in LA. It's life in a lot of places. Life in a lot of places. Yeah. Yeah. They say you can't afford a mortgage because that would consume 35% of your income. But while you're doing that, you're already paying 50% of your income in that $1,400 a month. That's life in a lot of U.S. cities these days. But you can't afford a $950 mortgage. Classism wins with Biden. Biden can't get off his neoliberal kick. Yeah, Steph is going to be on Rising tomorrow again. Yeah, I know. I bet she brings up Biden's student loan cancellation fuckery. I bet she does too. After all, Scott Fulweiler and she and Marshall Steinbaum, and I'm not sure who was the fourth of the co-authors, did the student debt, the cancellation report. Hang on a second. Let me see if I can quickly pull that up. Let me see if I've got it under Fulweiler. Fulweiler. Well, it wasn't under Scott. Might be under Stephanie. Hate it when I can't remember things. And Bonnie says, say something. Okay, I'm still here. I'm saying something. Everything's all right. I'm just trying to find this damn report so I can tell you who the other co-author was. Not very important, right? Okay, I'll stop wasting everybody's time. Except I can't. I get very compulsive about things like that. Okay, I'm back. So, anyway, she was a co-author of the student loan study that the MMTers did, and that showed that forgiving the $1.6 trillion in student loans, except when they wrote the study, I think it was $1.4 trillion back then, and maybe it's $1.7 trillion now. What they showed was that there would be a positive boost for the economy as a whole. In other words, everyone would benefit. The economy as a whole, it was going to benefit by roughly, I forget, it was 1.5% of GDP per year or something like that, because the federal government forgave student loans. That's what this macroeconomic study did. It's the only macroeconomic study of its kind. It's the only evidence we have that student loan debt forgiveness is in the general interest. But it's very emphatic about that. It is consistent with the public purpose to forgive student loans. Biden should act according to the public purpose right now without further delay. Make a lot of people happy, get some votes locked up. By the way, David Perdue declared his candidacy again for 2022. He's going to be running against Warnock in 2022. And of course, he may win. He may win if Biden doesn't forgive student debts. He may win if that $2,000 doesn't get there. I wish all of what this administration tries to do would not include who is worthy, student loans or COVID help or anything else. They waste so much time fussing while people suffer. They do, and not only that, they can't measure it. They can't know who is worthy or who deserves it, not before the fact. All they can do is waste a lot of time and create bureaucracy and create this impression of ineptitude. And it's not just an impression of ineptitude. It is ineptitude. To want to do that in the way they're doing it is ineptitude. It's incompetence. It's wonkiness. It's wonky people thinking they have more capability to get at the truth by wonking than they have about doing what people need and looking at the results afterwards. Steve says, in college I borrowed $2,000. Quickly became 10 grand. Jesus. Back then, they would settle with you. We settled for about 5 grand. That was a jip. Carmen came out of some neoliberals' butt. Doc, how's your weather situation? I don't know, honey. Has the snow come outside yet?
Do I have to get out and look?
No, I guess not. We're expecting 3 to 6 inches over the next couple of days.
In Loudoun County.
We don't really believe it because they've told us twice before this winter that there was going to be 3 to 6 inches, and there was never 3 to 6
There's
inches.
nothing out there.
Well, actually, once they told us there would be between 6 to 12 inches, and in fact, there was only maybe 2 inches, and the other times they told us 3 to 6 inches, and there was hardly a dusting on both occasions, including 2 days ago.
Doesn't look like
And
anything at all.
we're in a funny situation here. We're right between, we're not at the mountains yet. We're not at the sea yet. We're kind of in between the two. And there are a number, of weather fronts that are always coming through the D.C. area or sort of on the margins of the D.C. area. And maybe they even get to D.C. But somehow, just west of the city, there's not a hell of a lot of snow that we get every winter. And Steve Gonzo says Warren and Schumer supposedly with AOC and Biden push. Yeah, they are. I mean, Schumer is with AOC on everything these days. Well, not quite on everything, but he's with AOC on a lot of things these days. And he's acting like he's very strong, talking like he's very strong, talking like he's AOC Jr. all of a sudden. It the thoughts are concentrated tremendously when it's a matter of electoral survival. Right now, he wants to out AOC, so in 2022, he won't have to face AOC in the primaries. That's what it's about here locally. Lana says, destroyed, so hideous, so unnecessary. Cancel student loans. Carmen says, yeah, Biden is lying. Carmen says, is the Senate Congress on vacation again? Yeah, they're out of session because supposedly they're waiting for the committee work to end so the reconciliation bill can be ready for votes. That's what's happening. Kay says, I think so, Carmen. Steve Wolpert said, the interest on those loans is compounded. Next thing you know, you're up to your neck in it with no way of paying that shit off. They are loan sharks, and you cannot declare bankruptcy. You are fucked. Yeah, I know. Dolores says, yes, on vacation again while people continue to suffer. Kay said, I should have went to college when it was cheap instead of saving my ex from the draft. Shake my head. Steve Wolpert said, where's our checks?
Where's our checks?
Where's our check?
We didn't get it.
Right. Steve's talking about, he got the $600 check. He's talking about the $2,000 check. Carm Eunice says, thanks for your reply. That's infuriating. Yes, infuriating is right. It was infuriating. And Dolores says, where's my 2K? Hashtag where's my 2K? El Gringo said, I owed $8K for college back in 1990. I am an honorably discharged veteran, but we did not get the GI Bill in the Reagan administration era. Yeah, Reagan was such a wonderful guy to the military, wasn't he? He was so much in favor of national defense that he just screwed the military veterans, right? That's what he was all about. So he could save money, so he could run big deficits by having tax cuts for the rich. That was Reagan. Carmen Muniz, I hear they're not coming till the end of March, and the Republicans are gearing up to resistance. Well, they're gearing up to resistance, all right, but I think I think a bill might be ready by the last week, okay, in February. Might pass the House so that by the beginning of March, the bill is in the hands of the Senate. Then we'll see whether the Democrats can shake it loose by March 15th, which is really what they got to do. Stephen Day says, hallelujah, hashtag learn MMT. Yeah, Biden needs to get Stephanie Kelton over at the White House for a week to give him an intensive course in MMT, 8 hours a day. 8 hours a day, if he can still do things for 8 hours a day without falling asleep. Old Gringo says, all we got was VEAP, Variable Educational Assistance Program, which ended up being nothing because it was like a savings account. I never had much money to put in. Old Gringo says, so I ended up owing $8K and never graduated and never had a good paying job, and I am 57 years old now. God. That at 8K went up to 10K, then I paid it down to 8K. Carmen says, Democrats are spineless. L. Stephen Day says, but name again the economist Joe should consult. He should consult Stephanie Kelton. Because Stephanie will explain it to him in the clearest way she can. And she will call on the others Okay, so in other words, if she's having a session with Joe Biden, and that session deals with the job guarantee, she's strong on the job guarantee, but she's not the strongest one on the job guarantee. The strongest one is probably Pavlina Chernyeva. So she would call in Pavlina Chernyeva on that day. When it comes to inflation, the strongest one is probably either Scott Fullwiler or maybe Eric Batumanet, or maybe no, okay, or maybe they should get Bill Mitchell from Australia. He might be the strongest one when it comes to inflation. Also, Randy Ray would be very strong, okay, when it comes to inflation. Stephanie's pretty good on inflation too. But I think the best might be Eric. I don't know. I can't really say. Might be Eric, might be Scott. I'd say it's probably one of those two. I think Rowan Gray and Nathan Tankets are pretty strong on those things also. Old Gringo said, then life happened, and I wouldn't make payments, and I went up to 20K, and they garnished my checks from work, paid it down to 10K again. Steve says, where you been? We need more Stevenson here. Adlai. Old Gringo says, now it's 60K and rising. I can't make any payments, and thanks to Joe Biden, I can't even discharge it in bankruptcy, or else I do that. Yeah, why can't he at least make it possible for people who can't pay it to discharge it in bankruptcy? I mean, that is the very least he could do. At least people who really can't hack it could get out of it. What is wrong with that guy? Jesus. Stevens. Steve Wolfbrand said Stevens. Sorry. Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about Adlai. Ogringer says, I'm bracing myself for them to garnish again. So far, I'm safe. Well, you know what you got to do. Okay. If you think they're about getting ready to garnish, change banks, wait another 9 months, change banks again, keep on changing banks. Solana says, old Gringo, terrible story. I'm so sorry. That never should have happened. Old Gringo says, if they gig me enough from each payday, I mean, if they garnish too much, I'll be living out of my SUV. They could well garnish too much. They do that. Old Gringo says, and I'm a veteran, so it can happen to anyone. Yeah, it's happened to a lot of veterans have had problems. There are a lot of veterans living under bridges. Stephen Day says, hashtag the Biden record. Hashtag the Biden record group. This should go into the Biden record group in spades. Nana says, but maybe since DeVos is gone, no garnish will happen. I would love for your story to get out to the general public. Biden and Feinstein should share a room at the Alzheimer's home. Steve says, I heard Bonnie giggling. Yeah, she's getting a kick out of this. And Stephen Day says, knock, knock, Dave is here tonight. Old Gringo says, you know what, Joe Biden? Just let us discharge these school adults in bankruptcy. Why is this an exception? Trump could go bankrupt, but I can't. What the WTF? And Stephen Day says, Jubilee. In ancient Israel, they had a 50-year forgiveness. I'm 57. All debts before 50 should be forgiven. They should all be forgiven, but just let us discharge it through bankruptcy at a minimum. Lana says, I can tell you student loans do keep people from buying the home they want. Some would be qualified for a mobile home. Too bad they don't want that. I look at credit reports as part of my day job. Carmen Muniz says, precisely refusal of student loan cancellation is an underhanded institutional racism trick. It is. El Gringo says, it's the corporations behind the Fed government, in my opinion, calling the shots. Yep. Okay, says, no wonder we don't trust in our government anymore. And Biden keeps reinforcing that. He doesn't understand. That's the problem. If you want to restore trust in government, you have to make government trustworthy. How do you make government trustworthy? You have government do things for the people that are not in the interest of the corporations. That's how you get people to trust government again. That's what Roosevelt did. That's why they started trusting government again. Do you think they trusted government before that? No. Laugh out loud. A Marxist one called me a usury slut when I was talking MMT. Yeah, I know. I know Marxists are crazy. Well, I shouldn't say all Marxists are crazy. I don't think Richard Wolff is crazy. Steve Day says, color, yes, ancient Romans forgave all debts every Jubilee. I don't think Peter Cooper is crazy. And Steve Wolfbrand says, L. Stephen is very wise, as most Stevens and Streves. Streves? Steves. Oh, Gringo says, yes, just let's have the total forgiveness of student loans. And old Gringo says, if they garnish from me. Carmen says, laugh out loud. Marxists once called me usually. I've read that already. And old Gringo says, I'll be putting, typo correction for talking MMT. I'll be putting even less into the economy, a whole lot less than I'm already working for. Old Gringo says, I'm security guard, was a factory worker, was a drywall guy, painter, etc. I should have been a foreign languages teacher and history teacher. That was my forte. Evelina says, L. Stephen Day, also a class issue. Oh, I scrolled down again. Lana says, a racket, yes. Old Gringo says, war is a racket and student loans is a racket. Kay says, but your rants are the same as ours, Joe. Steve Wilburn says, Doc, don't blow a blood vessel. We'll get through this. That's how I stop from blowing a blood vessel. That's how I stop. Lana says, I also think higher ed should not just be a goal to get a job and survive. It should be to expand your horizons and pursue knowledge, etc. Well, actually, it is that for many of us. It was never about getting a job and surviving. It was always, for me, it was always about trying to find a way to do what I like to do. What I like to do best was teaching, and writing. And I'm not getting to write much anymore because the teaching is taking up most of my time these days. But that's all right. I really still love it. I've sacrificed a lot to keep on teaching.
You got me, babe.
I certainly do. I didn't sacrifice anything in that department. Steve Day says, in the context of loan settlement and forgiveness, I favor across the board that 85% Uncle Sam be not clouded by color balancing acted. I don't think I got that. L. Steve Day. Carmen Rena says, I said COVID-19 must be Antifa, hence MAGA refusal of wearing masks at the insurrection. Not you. Oh, okay, Carmen. Carmen says, at the Dollar Tree, Bonnie, the lariat was only $1 too. Oh, maybe we can find that at the Dollar Tree.
Wow.
Yeah, we have a Dollar Tree here too. Yeah. We can run over there after the snow. When the snow clears out. We're not going anywhere tomorrow. Carmen says,
No snow.
yeah, well, we're still not going anywhere tomorrow. No, Trump went to his celebration tent and watched the insurrection on big screens with his vile band of cowards. Well, not all his vile band of cowards. A good many of them were in the Senate, and a good many of them were in the House. Steve Wolbrand said he sure did. El Gringo says, I voted for Bernie in the primary. Me too. Bernie in the primary, me too, and the first time my son be. Even says, nothing worse than being politically stupid and morally wrong. Laugh out loud. At the same time, yeah, nothing worse than being both. Kay said, I did vote for Bernie in the primaries. DNC screwed us all. They did. I also would have voted for Bernie in my son's first vote ever. Old Gringo, Shahed for change. Yeah. If Bernie were president right now, he'd be in Texas rubbing turbine blades with his magic mittens while hovering over the turbine blades to thaw them out while in a hot air balloon. That's a great vision, Carmen. Try to find the graphics person to turn that into a graphic with the caption on the top. If Bernie were president right now, and then the graphic, that would be wonderful. That should give Biden something to think about. Carmen Eunice says, what? I missed what came before, not as Brooklyn kids. What came before, not as Brooklyn kids? I think I was saying that there were no soldiers as good as those kids from Brooklyn. Haven't you seen any World War II movies? Steve Wolfbrand said he would indeed. Old Gringo says, I actually don't know why people are shocked about Biden lying. Of course we wanted to get rid of Trump. That goes without saying. I'm always shocked when Biden lies. Old Gringo says, they keep bringing up Sister Soldier because that still burns their behind to this day. I know. That was a stinking trick that Bill Clinton pulled. But there are too many student loan recipients. Can he count? There are 40 million people there. More than 40 million people. That's a big group of people. Lana says, think if you owe student loans, they will reduce the AM out each month. The AM out each month by the payment amount. It's disgusting. I think you mean they will reduce. If you owe student loans, they pay the interest first. Okay, is that what you're saying? Okay, and then they, after they get all the interest for that month, then they take out the principal. So interest always gets paid up front. Is that right, Lana? Steve says, Kay, I love you, but you should take another look at Don Lemon. Just saying. Kay says he usually tells the truth as far as what Biden says. Yeah, but he's a damn neoliberal. Lana says Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, I think that's Freddie Mac, yeah, Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corp, total to income is 50% max. 50%! That's amazing. If Bernie were president, I'd be outside brushing and pampering my Shetland pony. Because, of course, you would have gotten a Shetland pony, right? Because we can all have ponies. Even in Kansas City, where I live, rent for most is going to be $900 and up, not including utilities, which will typically add on another $200. And those are just so-so places at best. I'm sure they are. Well, our place for seniors here, 870 square foot place. It has 4 rooms, but I said altogether 870 square feet. Subsidized, federally subsidized, $1,205 right now, with federal subsidies for senior people. Okay, and there's means testing, okay, in order to get into this particular development. Okay, and that's $1,205. That is a very, very big piece of our Social Security payments each month. A very, very big piece. Steve says, we'd all have ponies. And Belana says, old gringo, I should say. I was supposed to go to the language school in Monterey in the Army. Did you ever consider that? Just curious. Carmen says, I can name that tune in 3 notes. Can you hear the people sing? Yes. Da, 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 da. And Steve Wolfbrandt, and Carmen says, Steve Wolfbrandt, my point. Old gringo says, I considered it, Lana. The student loan report was published at the Levy Institute, I believe. Yes, it was. Absolutely. Working paper, blah, 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 blah. Or research paper, blah, blah. I've got it on my drive. I just couldn't find it. Doc, you got to sing us out on Can You Hear the People Sing? Monty says, Joey, Joey. Oh, Gringo says, the gunner chief talked me out of it. And Carmen says, Perdue smells $2,000 weakness under Biden. He does smell it. He does. He knows he can raise a lot of money again, but that it'll be tough for Warnock if that $2,000 doesn't come in. El Gringo says, he said they do to me what they did to him. Riverboat patrols, very dangerous in wartime. Yeah. Very dangerous in Vietnam, right? Kay says, we knew Biden wouldn't give up his corporate sponsors or he would give us single payer. El Gringo says, probably a lie, thinking back on it. Yeah, the big banks are, Biden's been selling out to them for many years. Well, we knew that. That's why we were against him in the primaries. Probably a lie, thinking back on it, so I just stayed on as a gunner in deck division.
You saw how it worked for
And Lana said, ugh, they begged me to go. I had an excellent score on the pretest. Next thing I discovered I was pregnant. Wasn't meant to be. Now, you know I am also a language nerd. Carmen asks, but VA has mountains? Yes, mountains within the Appalachian Range, specifically the mountains just to the west of here, are called the Catoctin Mountains, and they run up to Maryland as well, and they run south. I don't even know where they run south to. But yeah, we must be, 20, 30, 40 miles away from the mountains. Actually, we're probably about 10 miles away from Route 15 that runs up to the Catoctin Mountains. Okay, and then runs over the bridge into Maryland at Point of Rocks. It's the road to Frederick. And Lana says, yes, it's an intelligence job. I might not have had the stomach. Old Gringo says, by the way, I've looked into some wartime history regarding the Civil War. Lee made some huge mistakes just from a military standpoint. Sherman was really the military genius in that war. Yeah, Lee made some huge mistakes at Gettysburg, didn't he? And Carmen says Schumer is co-opting AOC for pandering purposes. He's pandering to AOC for co-opting purposes. He's trying to get AOC to wait another 6 years for her Senate seat. Old Gringo says, well, he better convince Nancy Pelosi to give her some good committee positions. He should already have convinced Nancy Pelosi to give her some powerful committee positions now, so she would want to stay in the House. The way Nancy Pelosi keeps on screwing AOC, all she'll want to do is build her public profile so she can run against him for the Senate. I mean, why would she want to stay in the House and endure that when she could be the junior senator from New York? Well, Gringo says, my Civil War ancestors fought under the commands of Grant and Bragg on each side, but those guys were very high up. And Steve Wolfbrand said, so that chubby, unfunny comedian is not his daughter? Are you sure? Yeah, I'm pretty sure she's not his daughter. I'm pretty sure she's his niece. But you can just Google it. Google it. Steve says, get my shot tomorrow. Wish me luck. I wish you luck. Kay says, I want the J&J shot. Those guys equal Grant and Bragg, not my ancestors. They were just privates. It's all right, old Gringo. And Steve Wolfbrand said, can we get some stinking badges? We need some stinking badges. Old Gringo says, my Union soldier ancestor was from Prussia. Why am I short and not tall? Laugh out loud. Maybe it's because of another ancestor.
How short is he?
How short are you, old Gringo? Otherwise known as Lance. And Kay says, everywhere I have heard from has had awful side effects from the second shots of both two-shot vaccines. We did not have awful side effects. We had what we would describe as mild side effects from the second shot.
Just wanted to sleep.
Huh?
Just wanted to sleep.
Yeah, Bonnie just wanted to sleep. I had some chills and had to go to the bathroom a lot the night on the eve of taking the shots. And I didn't feel well completely until it was dinner time the next night. But after that, I felt fine. So I would describe the side effects as mild. From the second shot. From the first, I would describe it, okay, as very mild. Just had a little pain close to the vaccination spot for a day or two. Well, Gringo said last time they garnished directly from my paycheck. And Gringo said, hashtag the Biden record got it. Kay says, my roommate gets his second shot on March 2nd. Gringo says, I'm afraid that the billionaire corporate establishment class has decided they already have enough money and control and no longer need us. That's good. Now, if they'd only leave us alone.
It's going to kick you while you're down.
so we can use the monetary sovereignty part of this. Lana asks, do you think it will move Biden if we illuminate Biden having a hand in preventing student loans in BK along with his waffling in the town hall to embarrass him on the Twitter campaign? The only thing I think we should have a Twitter campaign about right now, Lana, is getting rid of the filibuster, making Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema cave. We have to make them cave. Got to get rid of the filibuster. If we get rid of the filibuster, then Schumer and Pelosi can pass student loan forgiveness. Under those circumstances, when it reaches his desk, Biden will sign it. He's not going to veto it. Believe me, Biden can do it tomorrow. But I don't want to spend a week on that when we can spend a week on making Manchin and Sinema cave and act like Democrats. Old gringo, good question, Lon. Jubilee means forgive all debts. The ancient Romans did it occasionally. Old gringo says, I like how you and Bonnie get along. Special kind of couple.
You do too.
We do too, old gringo. And thank you. And Steve says, but Bonnie, quote, you got me, babe. Sonny and Cher. Well, we've been married for a lot longer than Sonny and Cher ever were. El Gringo says, Joe, what do you think about the civil war within the GOP? Trump seems to be attacking Mitch McTurtle. But also, will this make the Democratic Party less likely to fight for us? I don't know. It's hard to say. I think the devil is in the details. But furthermore, some people think Trump already won. That in the first exchange, that he blasted Mitch right out of the water. All he had to do was point out that all people could ever get from Mitch was that lousy $600. And he blamed Mitch for blowing the presidency because he wouldn't come up with $2,000. And of course he was right. But what he never said was, I was really stupid. I was really stupid to not withdraw the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett so I could have forced Mitch into coming up with the $2,000. He's never acknowledged that was a stupid move on his part. He didn't think it through. He needed something to hold over Mitch's head. That's what he had, and he didn't make use of it. So I think Trump screwed himself. He should have known what Mitch McTurtle was going to do. Because what Mitch was trying to do, he was trying to hold together his caucus. And he had this whole bunch of idiots who didn't want to give anybody a penny. So what was he going to do? He had to go along with the problem solvers. He's still trying to keep control of that caucus. I mean, even now, that's why he wouldn't convict Trump. If these same idiots who wanted the $600, who wouldn't give anybody more than $600, they're the same people who were afraid to convict Trump. And Barney is going like this with her. Great idea about the if Bernie were president visual. Yeah, that's a wonderful visual. Wonderful idea for a visual. Who could do that? Who do we know who could do visuals like that? Maybe Jimmy Sunderland can use that idea. Maybe. Oh, Gringo says, laugh out loud at the Shetland pony comment. And Carmen says, that ain't cheap, 1205. It's cheap for around here. Around here is really expensive. This is Loudoun County. Google now, what are the richest counties in the United States? Find out where Loudoun County stands. So you may ask, why do we live in Loudoun County? And the answer is, this is where our grandchildren are.
And our
And our,
health insurance.
yeah, this is where our grandchildren are. And where our son and our daughter-in-law are. But it's not the only county to live in for our health insurance. We got a number of others, including in Maryland, including, lots of counties to go for our health insurance. See, so it's been real, it's been fun, but not real fun, JK. And Carmen says, 7 variants in the US now. Steve says, viruses mutate, it's what they do. Yes, they do. That's why we got to bring them under control almost immediately, so they cannot mutate. They'd still mutate every year. Steve Wolfbrand says, yeah, and they're antibody resistant, smartass. Old Gringo says, I'm 5'2", Barney.
Oh, I am too.
Barney says she is too. It's probably the French on my mom's side, although some French are very tall. My mom is only 4'9". Mine was taller than that, like about 5 feet or 5'1". Steve Wolfbrand said, don't start your shit. Steve Wolfbrand, you started your shit. You love to poke the bear. I'm done with your condescending shit tonight. Steve says, so you know I love you, Carmen. Carmen says, you better or I'll kick your ass. Steve said we should get married. El Gringo says, Mimi. Who's Mimi?
Marry me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mindy, not Mimi. I don't know if we can ask Mindy because I'm not sure. I love Mindy's graphics. She's terrific. Okay, but last I noticed, she was still tied to Steve, like a very tightly tied to Steve. El Gringo says, Mimi is my friend from Belgium. El Gringo says, Mindy is with Real Progressives, I think. Yes, she was when I was with Real Progressives. We were very friendly then. But the instant I became disengaged from there, we were no longer friendly. Lana says, richest counties, Connecticut, New Jersey, Virginia, California. Those are the states with the richest counties, right? Which of those counties in all those states is the richest county, Lana? Steve Wolfbrand, I'll get rid of you to get insurance and your Social Security, laugh out loud. And El Gringo says, Lana, not Johnson County, Kansas, and Dade County, Florida. El Gringo says, short people unite, Bonnie. Lana says, I live in Johnson County, nowhere near suburbs of D.C. No, she said, I lived in Johnson County, nowhere near suburbs of D.C. And Steve Wolfbrand said, and my 401k? Lana says, Amber is also very good, okay, at graphics. Okay, I think Amber is very good at certain graphics, yes. That's right. And I can ask Amber. I certainly can ask Amber. I'd be happy to sing us out, Steve, but I don't know the words. So therefore, I can never remember the words of Can You Hear the People Sing. It's terrible. I always get them mixed up. As Carmen says, Steve Wolfbrand, and yep, my 401k you mean. Okay, folks, I'm caught up. My computer says 11:43, and your last comment was at 11:43. So it's good night for me, and Bonnie, and thank you for a very, very good conversation tonight. I enjoyed it. Steve Wolfbrand, yep, my 401k you mean. Lana says, I can't remember all the county names. Palm Beach and Miami, Florida, very expensive. Don't know where it all fits on the list. I think you can Google that. There are lists. I think you can find lists by county for the whole United States. Try Googling that. Lana says, good night. Steve, I'm not going to read that particular comment out. Old Gringo says, peace out, rainbow trout, as my youngest daughter used to say. Peace out, rainbow trout. That's great, Lance. Kay says, thank you all for another great discussion. I love you all, and we love you, Kay. Good night. Sleep tight. Google demographics, maybe? Yeah, Google demographics, maybe. Steve says, good night. Carmen says, good night. It was sweet and good. Great stream. Doc, Joe, and Bonnie, good night. Good night, folks. Well,